Hi, it's Dia. Today we're going to do a few things. First, we're going to use these pencils that I got from the dollar store. These are Jot neon pencils, regular colored pencils. Those are 10 in a box. And then we're going to use Crayola, a 50 set of Crayola basic pencils that you probably see in school. And we're going to color this image using only those pencils I just showed you from the dollar store and Michael's that I spent under $9 for. Before I do that, I'm going to color two more mushrooms that I featured in my video from last week where I talked about blending, and I just wanted to see if these two brands of pencils, those dollar store pencils and the Crayola pencils, can compare and create a mushroom that is similar to the Prismacolor mushrooms that are already colored here. So the first set I'm using is the dollar store pencils that I literally spent $1 for. There are 10 in a box, and right out of the gate, I can tell you that they're very hard, and they're probably very familiar to you because you probably used pencils like this 100 times when you were a kid. So the first thing I did was, just like I did with the other pencils that were colored by Prismacolor, I put down a layer of yellow. Now, different than the other Prismacolor ones, I only had a choice of one yellow, and this is called mid yellow. And you know what? I should tell you, they're called LIQUIMARK pencils. So I colored with yellow, and then I went over the top of that with orange, and these are the actual names of the pencils. And they're, okay, there's a little LIQUIMARK identifier on the pencil. And then I colored with the orange, and I went over the yellow, and like I said, they're hard pencils, and they're waxy, and they're not very bright. So you can see the first layer of yellow was fine. It looks like yellow, but then when I went over the top of it with the orange, just like I did with the Prismacolors, it didn't quite look as bold as I thought. And then I added red. Now let me look. Yep, that's called bright red. And I'm pushing pretty hard here because I wanted it to be relatively bright like the other mushrooms, but couldn't do it. But like I said, I was trying to make it look similar, and I did the best that I could. The pencils were tough to layer with, to say the least. And at the same time, it was kind of fun and interesting to use them. Now, my other suggestion is that I didn't do here is I might have done it differently if I knew that they were so hard to layer, and I kind of assumed they were, but I was trying to do like the other ones, do it the same as the Prismacolors. I may have just done the yellow section all by itself, the orange section all by itself, and the red, and try to very carefully blend those areas of demarcation that separated the colors and see how that turned out. And the colors might have looked more vibrant if they didn't have to lay on top of one another and get slightly diluted. Now here I tried to make it a little bit darker by adding the, let me see what color that is actually, violet. So I tried to make it a little more intense over there, and it didn't really even look like violet. It kind of looked like gray. So it's not bad. I just couldn't recreate the exact colors, obviously, because I was so limited. I literally had 10 pencils, but the mushroom doesn't look bad. Oop, and then I decided I was going to go over the top of that with some deep brown, and just to see if I could add more dimension to it. Now that one did add a little bit more oomph, and it's nice and shadowy, but the colors aren't as bright in it. Like the mushroom kind of looks like it might be in a shadow more than the other mushrooms do. Now I'm going in with the Crayola pencils, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, except I have more options. So I used a lighter yellow, which was called yellow, and then I used golden yellow, and then I used yellow orange, orange, and then two different reds. I used red orange and red and mahogany, and basically recreated. So I will just basically cut to the chase here because you know what it looks like. Now I'm filling it in with the white Signo gel pen, and I'm also going to use some Gamsol, just like I did in the other pictures, to, actually it's Turpenoid, to blend them. And I can say about the Crayola pencils, they're also very hard. They hold a point great. They're a little bit brittle. There are definitely more choices than the other set that I had. There was only 10. Once again, they're a little bit more waxy or filler-y than the pencils that I've used previously. Although I can't say I hated them. I created a decent looking mushroom here, and I kind of enjoyed using them, especially with the flower, which you'll see in a bit. Now here I am just blending the colors in. They did get a little bit brighter, but not as much as the Prismacolors. Once you hit the Prismacolors with the Turpenoid, it's like beautiful. So here are the results of the two mushrooms with the dollar store pencils. I can't say I dislike them. Now, obviously the one on top, the one to the left with the really basic pencils from the dollar store that cost me $1 that are 10 in a set, it doesn't look as great, but you know what? You kind of make do with what you have. And as for the Crayola ones, I really liked them. Now, we're going to move on to this image from my coloring book, Coloring Dreams, and we're going to only be using the 50 set of Crayola pencils and the Jot set of colored pencils that I also spent $1 on, and I'm going to be incorporating the neon colors. I'm going to leave this part real time just in case you want to copy the technique. And I can also talk a little bit more about what I thought about the set. So at first I used those yellow colors again, which were yellow and golden yellow. There's also in the set a lemon yellow, which is more like an alien or an acid green, which is also really nice, and I did use that in the center of the flower later on, and also on a couple leaves. So here I'm just filling in an area that I thought would be yellow in the flower, and I also thought might be reflecting some sunlight. And I'm kind of going back and forth and, you know, thinking what I want this flower to look like at this point. I like to add flowers in my books that actually exist in the world. Sometimes I don't know what they're called, or I have an idea, or they even have a nickname. I would define many flowers that look similar as a dogwood or a crocus, and I look most of them up, but not all of them. And this flower is one of those cases. It's kind of a dogwood, yet it's not in a tree. So I kind of felt like I had more free reign to do whatever I wanted with the colors. So it's kind of the colors, I thought it would be kind of cool to mix pansy-ish details with the beautiful pinks of a dogwood flower. So the first color I used was pink. And I filled in this area, and I have to say, these pencils hold a point like no other. Sometimes they're so sharp that the point almost scratches the surface of the paper. So I found myself using my little scrap pad or paper and dulling it down the tiniest bit so it didn't have that almost needle sharp point. This is the color Peach. And I have to say, for the most part, the colors are relatively vibrant. They're not as vibrant as Prismacolors. They're not as vibrant as Polychromos, but I spent under $7 for this whole 50 set of Crayolas. And like I said, for the most part, they're pretty bright and they're relatively accurate. There was one or two pencils in there that you have to watch for. There's a color called Pale Rose, and the barrel looks beautiful, almost like a light lavender. And then when you go to use it, it's like a grayish wisteria color. So you kind of have to watch. It would have probably been a good idea if I swatched it first, but I didn't, and I kind of just wanted to wing it just to see what it would be like to just try to draw a whole image. Oop, here's that color that I was talking about, that pale rose that turned very gray, as you can see. So I stopped using it. It worked out fine. I wasn't going to erase it because I like to leave even my mistakes in the pictures. First of all, to see what I can do with them, and second of all, to show that it's not the end of the world. You can fix almost everything. It's not really a mistake, and sometimes it's a good mistake, and it works out great, and because it's something you would never do on purpose. This is lime green. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 greens in the set, and in my opinion, never enough greens in the set. Okay, that color that I'm using right now is once again pink, and the pink, there's two pinks. There's a bubblegum, which is exactly what it sounds like, that really clear pink, and then there's pink, which is almost, it's got the slightest tinge of lavender in it, and I love it. Now you can see that I'm going back and forth over and over certain areas, and the colors are very light. I wish there were a couple more like lavender, wisteria colors in there. Then I went, whoops, with that color, which is magenta. So right there, for instance, I wish that was more of a subtle and soft color, so I just had to use the magenta lighter, and then I went over the top of it with the pink again, and I ended up going over that gray area also. The nice thing about these pencils is that, well, I was just going to say the nice thing. There's a good side of it and there's a bad side of it. The good side about it is that they go on so light at first. You almost feel a little bit of freedom using them because they're so light that there's less initial mistakes or an initial like, oh my gosh, that's too much. I needed there to be less there, especially when you're doing areas that sort of blend into a lighter or a white area. It's hard to get those exact little edges, and I'm fussy about that kind of thing. So this set allows you to worry less about that. Now on the other side of the coin, the bad side is I had to go over many times to get certain colors that I wanted to appear to be those actual colors that I wanted. For instance, the pink I wanted to be a pinky, magenta, lavender, and I had to do a lot of gyrations to come up with the actual colors that I wanted. And it wasn't because there wasn't enough colors in the set. It was just because they're so light that you need many layers. Now I started to use salmon. When I was first doing this picture, the image, I thought it was going to leave some areas very light, and the colors in the set lend themselves to a light image to begin with. So I thought it was going to be very light, and then at the end, I realized I haven't even used the neons yet, and I decided I was going to make it more vibrant. So you'll see in a little bit, I start to feel like, ugh, I'm almost done. I'm just going to do the leaf and the end. This is the image. And then you'll see that I kind of changed my mind and I said, let's push these a little bit and see what happens. So I added some areas on the edges to make it almost look like the leaves are bent a bit. So shading with these isn't actually that hard because when you color very lightly, it's very light. So when you go over and you push a little bit more, the colors are more intense. So it was easy to do shading with the same color. I didn't have to use a shadow color like a purple or a gray or even a blue. I'm adding some more crimps and bends in the leaves right now using the magenta and the pink. There was another color I used to, oh yeah, there was light orange. And these colors work really nicely together. They're kind of like light citrusy fruity colors and they look so nice on this flower. That was pink again. And adding some more bends and crimps and shadows. In my head, this flower wasn't a flat leaf. It was bendy, it was wavy, and it was interesting. Now here I started to go over the yellow areas where there was an indication in the picture that the flower might have a crimp in it or a bend, and the light orange was too light. I kept going with it because it did add a little bit of nice interest and detail, but then a little bit later I ended up going in with orange and yellow orange to make it even brighter. I'm going back in with the pink and adding more detail. The lights, like I said before, in this set, when you don't push hard, I should say the colors in this set, when you don't push hard, are very, very light. And I wasn't used to it, and I kept having to go back. It's almost like you're used to using another set, so you're used to the results from that set also. So I guess sort of somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I was thinking there should be more color here, but I kept going back over and over. So this flower probably took me longer than it would have if I had pencils that had more pigment in them. The petals looked a little bland to me, even though I was adding brighter colors like this magenta. So I thought I would add some other kind of interest. So rather than having just colorful leaves, I decided to add some detail to the leaves. I've seen tiger lilies that have dots on them and lines on them, so I thought, why not add to this, because it's a partially invented flower anyway. And I really like the way those mini little dots and mini stripes accented, first of all, the pink and the shape of the leaf. I also decided to use that magenta as a shadow. When one leaf was on top of, when one petal was on top of another petal, I made an area of the darker magenta right next to it. So it looked like the one on top was slightly more forward, and the one behind it had a shadow on it that was cast from the leaf above. Now I picked up the orange here to do a shadow because the leaf underneath it was done in salmon and peach. So the shadow there would be darker peachy or darker orange and not that same magenta. Then I realized that that color was sort of like a bright, shiny, sunny color, so I started to add it to different areas of the flower, and I really liked the results. I added it to some of the shadowy pink areas too, and it made it sort of come to life a bit. And actually, the more I used these pencils, the more I got to understand them a bit, just like anything else. When I was first using the Prismacolors, I was very unfamiliar with them, and then I got used to them, and I could figure out how to use them better. I love doing this, and it's really interesting what you figure out by actually using them. And people can tell you, and you can listen to videos, and you can read about them, but until you have it in your hand and you figure out how you're going to use them, yeah, it's very different once you do it. I'm doing a little bit of the stem here in green. That is yellow green. And the other color that I used that was a little bit darker was jade green. And I'm not really going to go much further down because I don't want the video to be too long. Now I took those greens also and put them around the center, and you can see it's hard to layer a light color on top of another color, or even a light-ish color. You can see it a tiny bit, but it didn't come out as bright as I thought. Now I'm adding some more detail. I added some of those lines and dots in mahogany also, and I like that. It made it more intense, and it made it brighter. Now right about here, I was thinking I was almost done. I liked it. It was okay, and I kind of pre-assumed that I was going to have okay results with Crayola colored pencils. And like I said, about here, I was like, you know what? I'll just do the leaves. So I took lime green, and I just basically colored in that area. I wasn't thinking I was going to do anything wonderful or extremely detailed. And then I took the lemon yellow, which I was kind of referring to before as like that alien yellow, and I just colored in that area. You can see there's lines and shapes. You can add more to it, and I just was in my head kind of finished. So I did a few leaves. And then something was bothering me about the picture. I didn't like it enough. And I was kind of listening to my own voice in my head. I've told people so many times, if you don't like your picture, you're probably not finished. So I took my own advice, and I thought that I would just give it another whirl. So I picked up the magenta again, and I started to go over some details. What I would just call, like finishing it up. So I thought that if I was a little more careful and a little more finessey, that I would like the picture better. And then I realized I didn't like it because there just wasn't enough to it for me. So if this picture was going to be a picture all by itself, and there was not the rest of the coloring page, I would not have been happy with the results. So I wanted to go back in and make it something that I was happy with. So I grabbed the salmon and the light orange, and I started to add more detail in the pink area. I kind of went over it, and you can see right there I did not do a perfect job. It was a little bit messy, and then I went over and I fixed that. I thought the yellow area looked pretty. I like the yellow, but I thought it also looked a little blah. So I grabbed the mahogany and I started to add more detail in that flat yellow area. And I started to instantly like it better. So not only did I have little dots, now I had little almost veins coming from the center toward the outside. And I was only going to keep those little dots on the bottom leaves. And then I thought, why? Give it a whirl. Like, make this picture the best you can. So I added it everywhere. I added it to the top area. I added it to the yellow leaves also, which I didn't think I was going to do. I also focused a little more on separations and shadows in that yellow area, which I hadn't been doing before. Now I added orange to some of those more magenta and peachy areas. And I was just trying to intensify some of the colors that were already down that I liked, but just weren't quite enough. You also might notice that as I use these pencils, I don't keep them as deadly sharp. In fact, I liked having like sort of a flat side, because you can use that flat side for larger areas and then twist the pencil a tiny bit and you have a really, really sharp point. Now I'm adding some green. Now that was the darker green. Let me tell you which one that was. Oh, here we go. That one was called green. And I added that little swirly doodle. I don't know why. I thought it looked pretty. And I thought it would, like, that green would be a nice contrast in that very light, peachy, yellowy pink area. And the more I added green to the center, the more I liked the image. I decided to make the leaf more vibrant also. And I went over that area around the very center that I had gone over with light orange before. I went over it again with orange and made some more of those veins and shadowy areas coming out from that very center. I also added some orange dots and lines, more interest. And I went over some of the shadowy areas with orange that I had previously done with magenta. And somehow with this set, it worked out lovely. I think I also learned with using this set that, and actually several of the sets, every set has its own sort of set of rules. And once you know the rules, or once you get to know the rules, the pictures come out better. And as I did this picture a little bit at a time, I started to understand the pencils a bit more and which ones were a certain way. Like this yellow, this is the darker yellow. Yellow. It's called golden yellow. You can see it goes right over the top. That one's very pigmented. Not all the colors in this set do that. And that yellow added vibrancy. I also realized I hadn't been using the neons, and I will add them toward the end. I wanted to make that area look a little bit more deep and separate from the actual petals of the flower. I used green. I used mahogany. I used Bordeaux just in that little tiny area. And then I used some Bordeaux in the actual petals. and I used Bordeaux in that area that I had left orange before. So as you can see, as I go, the picture becomes more and more vibrant, and I liked it more and more also. Now for the rest of the video, I basically went back and forth between the colors that I had already used. The only one that I didn't reuse was the pale rose, and that would be a great color for certain things, but not this picture. It was fine in that one little area kind of over by where I'm coloring now, but I ended up coloring over most of it. So here's the pink again. Here's the mahogany. I'm adding more of those little interest lines. Sometimes I added little round dots and sometimes I added lines. Not quite sure what made me pick what in certain cases. It just sort of happened. Whatever I decided at the moment is what I ended up doing. I ended up going over some of the wavy areas and the shadow areas with the slightly darker colors, since the entire image became slightly brighter and more intense. That ended up working nicely. What I did right there was try to figure, would the area that was a peak appear to be indented, or would the other area appear to have a shadow? I couldn't quite decide at that point, and I decided eventually that it wouldn't really matter. It would just depend on what you want the flower to be. I'm adding the darker green beneath the petal area so it looks like there's a bit of a shadow. I also decided I will eventually do this entire picture in Crayola pencils. I may have said that already, I don't remember. I went in at the end with some of the neon colors. They don't have any information on the barrel, so that was sort of a very bright neon magenta. And I also went in with your typical sort of bright rose, and I added some just some coloring areas, and I went over some of the pink with the neon pink. So here's the finished image. I went over everything with a white Crayola pencil just to blend, and I can't say it blended as well as some of the other sets I've used, but all in all, I was happy and surprised at how nice the flower actually turned out with the Crayola pencils and a few neons. I would have no problem recommending the Crayola set to someone who wants to see if they like to color, and I can see myself using this set for the first time, for the first layer of an image that I'm drawing or coloring. The set of 8 neons by Jot is actually great and more than worth the $1 I spent on them. As for the set of 10 LIQUIMARK pencils, I would say that they're great for kids, but in my opinion, it would be nice to have more than 10 in a set, and they do not layer well. So thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up or a share, and I hope you hit subscribe below and hit that bell so you'll be notified when my videos come out and you won't miss a thing. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye.